Hello, this is Mei here. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and a performance coach, and I work with driven professionals, people who hold themselves to a high standard and carry more than they let on, and are ready for more ease. This series is a 10-part look at perfectionism. Not the kind that needs to be fixed, the kind that's been working, that's produced a real result, and that is also quietly costing you things you haven't fully added up yet. We are at volume 9. In this one, we look outward at what your standard does to people closest to you. Not because you meant it to, but because that is what a sustained high-pressure system does to the environment around it. Now, there's a particular dynamic that doesn't get talked about much. Not because it's rare, it's actually very common amongst people who operate at a high level, but because from the outside, it doesn't look like a problem. A client I worked with some time ago was by external measure doing well, respected, reliable, someone the people in their life genuinely counted on. But what they started to notice slowly, and then all at once, was the people around them had stopped bringing them things. Not the practical things, the other things. The doubts, the half-formed ideas, the conversation that don't have a tidy ending. Nobody had told them to stop, they just had. And my clients had been too busy to notice until one day she looked up and realized the relational temperature had dropped considerably. And they couldn't quite say when. That's what this video is about. When we talk about the cost of professionalism in this series, we usually mean the personal cost, the exhaustion, the revision loops, the gap between what you produce and what you are actually willing to accept. We've been in that territory across earlier volumes. What tends to go unexamined is what this standard does outward, not to your work, to the people in your immediate environment. Think of it this way. A high-pressure weather system doesn't only affect the air above it, it reorganizes the atmosphere for miles around. Other weather patterns reroute. The conditions in the vicinities are shaped by the system, not through any intention, but through physics. It is simply what it is, and everything around it responds accordingly. The driven professional's standard works the same way. The people who live or work within its range, a partner, a colleague, a family member, begin to read the conditions. They learn often without consciously deciding to, that certain things don't land well here. Certain conversations create friction. Certain attempts fall short of what the standards seem to expect. So they adjust. They find routes around the pressure rather than into it. It doesn't look like conflict. It doesn't look like anything dramatic at all. It looks like people getting on with things, which is part of why it is so easy to miss. Here's what the research on professionalism in relationships consistently shows. The withdrawal isn't personal, it is structural. When someone consistently performs at a high level in a close relationship, handles things, projects composure, carries the weight without showing it, the people around them makes a reasonable adjustment. They stop offering, not because they don't care, because the signal they've received over and over is, this person has it under control and they don't need what I'm about to bring. The gap between what you give and what you carry, the competence that's visible and the cost that isn't, that's something specific to people close to you. It teaches them not to see the cost because you haven't let them. That's not a character failing, theirs or yours. It's what happens when a sustained high standard creates a pressure field and people inside it learn to live with the condition rather than push against them. The standard is doing this, not you as a person. The standard as a system, that distinction matters because it changes where the work actually is. The question isn't whether you should care less or perform less. It's whether you can see clearly enough what the system is producing and choose differently about parts of it. Now, there are 3 patterns worth naming, not to diagnose anything, but because once you can see them, they are much harder to unsee. Now, pattern number 1 is the self-edit. People close to a high standard individual learn to self-edit. They stop bringing things that might not land. The half-formed ideas, the problem that feels too small, the conversation without a clean resolution. Over time, the range of what comes into the relationship quietly narrows. Both people feel it as a kind of flatness, but neither has a clear account of how it got there. Now, pattern number 2, doing instead of being. Driven professionals often express care through doing. They take on more. They solve things before others get the chance to try. And this is experienced as love, as reliability, because it is. But it's also, over time, a form of distance. When you do everything, others stop attempting, not out of laziness, but because the space for their attempts keeps closing before they reach it. The connection that was supposed to be built through the doing doesn't build, because doing isn't the same thing as being present to someone. Now, pattern number 3, seen at work, missing at home. In professional life, the driven professional is seen. The work is visible, assessed, and at least some of the time recognized. In close relationships, that structure doesn't exist in the same way. The standard is applied just as rigorously, often more so, but the feedback loop isn't there. The gap between how fully you are seen at work and how much you are actually visible to the people closest to you is something high-achieving individuals notice frequently. They just rarely look at it directly. I worked with someone, a senior leader, widely regarded, experienced, who came into a session describing what they called a loneliness they couldn't account for. Surrounded by people, trusted by the team, genuinely loved by the partner, and yet a kind of relational isolation that didn't match any of those facts. When we looked at it carefully, what became clear was the people in his life had been responding to the version of him that was always managing, always capable, always carrying without letting the weight show. And that version, reliable, composed, in control, has become so consistent that people close to them had stopped looking for anything underneath it. His partner has stopped asking how he was and meaning it, because the answer was always some version of fine. His colleagues had stopped bringing the harder conversations because this person always seemed to be 10 steps ahead already. His close friends had stopped suggesting he slow down because it had never been appear to be needed. None of those people had decided to withdraw. They'd responded to the conditions. And the conditions, the pressure system, this person had been running, had quietly taught everyone around them that this particular person didn't require what connection actually requires. Being seen when you're not at your best, what the client needed wasn't a different standard of work. It was different conditions in the relationship that mattered. Conditions where the system could ease enough for people in it to find them again. Now, the thing about a pressure system is the people inside it rarely describe the pressure directly. They describe other things. a partner who's become more self-contained, a colleague who's stopped pushing back, a friendship that used to have a certain quality and doesn't quite anymore. The distance is real. The course is harder to place. In the final volume, we look at what comes after this. Not a resolution, but a recalibration. What it looks like when the standard stays and the system around it becomes one the people in your life can actually live in. Please like and subscribe for more contents to come. I am Mei at Evolve Minds. Until my next video, thank you for watching.